What is poppin', my Daredevils? It is me, NT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. Daredevil is back, born again after Netflix lost the rights to make more seasons of Daredevil, and we all thought we would never see Charlie Cox as our favorite blind badass ever again. The first 2 episodes just dropped, and boy, am I traumatized. So, let's break down all the details and Easter eggs that Marvel Studios threw into this line-crossing doozy of a premiere. And spoilers ahead, of course, so if you have not experienced the shock of this show's crazy opening, what are you doing, you big dare dummy? Go steal your uncle's Disney Plus password right now and get to watching. Alright, so the episode starts brilliantly with the top and bottom of the screen separating to reveal the streets of New York, almost like the eyes of the audience were slowly opening themselves. Excellent symbolism for the overall born-again theme of the series. We then see Matt Murdock, Foggy Nelson, and Karen Page all clocking out of the law firm Nelson, Murdock, and Page, a law firm that they all founded together at the very end of the 3rd Netflix season of Daredevil. And after a long day of being a group of goody two-shoes lawyers, our gang finally head out to get absolutely smashed at their favorite establishment, Josie's Bar, headed by Josie herself, played once again by actress Susan Varen. And at the bar, Karen Page makes an attempt to get in Matt Murdock's pants, but Matt Murdock reminds her that engaging in premarital relations would be in strict violation of their pact to remain friends following their past romantic flings. And also, Jesus is watching, and Matt is a good Catholic boy. Meanwhile, the soon-to-be slain Foggy Nelson has his last supper along with current Assistant District Attorney Kirsten McDuffie, played by actress Nikki M. James. McDuffie was also an assistant DA in the comics when she was first introduced in 2011's Daredevil #1. Her and Matt Murdock would eventually get involved romantically, while also setting up a law firm together like they do in this series. But after a while, Matt would ultimately choose to break off their relationship. But in this show, these two are merely platonic friends. But anyway, during Foggy and Kirsten's conversation, Foggy mentions that he used to work at Hogarth, Chow, and Benowitz, the law firm headed by Carrie Ann Moss's Jerry Hogarth. And not far from Kirsten and Foggy are Detective Angie Kim, played by Rui Bo Kian, and retiring NYPD Detective Cherry, played by Clark Johnson. In regards to Kian, this isn't her first rodeo as part of a Marvel TV show, as she previously played the role of May, the roommate of Erin Moriarty's Hope Schlottman in the very first season of Jessica Jones. And while Detective Cherry seems like he may be an original creation for the show, there is still the possibility that this character is a loose adaptation of NYPD Officer Cherry, introduced in 2001's Daredevil #27. And on the bar TV, the words "White Tiger busts up bodega robbery" appears on the lower third of a new segment on local vigilante White Tiger, played by the late Camar de los Reyes, who passed away from cancer at the age of 56 on Christmas Eve 2023. Episode 2 of the series goes more into that character, and because of that, the production would dedicate that episode to him right up top. In the comics, Hector Ayala, the White Tiger, would make his first appearance in 1975's The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu #19, and it would be quite the momentous comic book debut, as White Tiger was actually Marvel's first ever Hispanic superhero. So it's super cool to have gotten to see this character come to life in this series. In the comics, White Tiger is given superhuman strength, stamina, and durability by channeling the powers of a supernatural deity known as the Tiger God, making this character of White Tiger to be the newest Marvel avatar on the block after we've seen avatars like Moon Knight, Scarlet Scarab, Arthur Harrow, Namor, Black Panther, Caecilius from Doctor Strange, and Jane Foster's Mighty Thor. The Tiger God powers are transferred to Hector through the White Tiger amulet, which we see in episode 2. After Hector dies in the Marvel Comics, the White Tiger amulet would find its way to the hands of Hector's niece, Angela Del Toro, who became the White Tiger for a short time before ultimately becoming a villain herself. And after her villainous turn, the amulet would then eventually be worn by Hector's sister, Ava Ayala, who currently holds the mantle of White Tiger today. Cherry then laments about how superhuman heroes like Daredevil and White Tiger are beginning to make regular Joe Schmo police officers feel obsolete. More signs towards coming superhuman resentment in the MCU before the mutant saga comes in full swing after Secret Wars. Regular people are starting to feel inferior to the growing number of enhanced individuals, and with that feeling of inferiority comes a fear of being replaced by this new demographic of beings, and that fear will eventually lead to hate towards anyone born different, creating a perfect xenophobic world for mutants like Magneto to be cranky in. But anyways, Foggy then gets a fateful call from one of his clients named Benny, which Matt overhears with his special ears. In sensing Benny to be in trouble, Matt suits up as Daredevil, appearing for the first time in a suit as he lands on a nearby fire escape. And as he stands on that fire escape, I love how this production framed his head to be inside of this circular church window in the background, almost like it's giving this Catholic crime fighter a halo of sorts. However, little does Matt know that a bonus Benny was preparing to ruin his night real damn bad, in the form of one Benjamin Poindexter, aka Bullseye, as portrayed by Wilson Bethel in Daredevil Season 3. As Bullseye prepares to clog the fog with bullets, we see him use a paperclip to pin an annoying-ass fly to the wall, a nod to Colin Farrell's Bullseye, who kills a fly with a syringe at the very end of Daredevil 2003. Colin Farrell's Bullseye would also famously kill a bar patron with a paperclip in that movie as well. After killing this fly, Bullseye fixes the flickering light bulb, allowing us to see the Bullseye symbol on one of his gloves, a symbol that is traditionally found on the character's forehead in the comics. And naturally, a target can be found on the sights of Bullseye's gun that he uses to shoot Foggy Nelson clean through the chest like a psycho before heading down to Josie's bar and attempting to shoot Karen as well. But before he can, in comes Daredevil to stop him, triggering an incredible and nearly seamless single-shot fighting sequence between the two from the bottom to the very top of Josie's bar, starting off the season with a phenomenal hallway fighting sequence that has become a staple in all Daredevil seasons. And as they fight, Matt is also able to stay focused on Foggy's heartbeat, but unfortunately, Matt would ultimately be forced to listen to Foggy fade away from existence, a moment that serves as a nod to comic book Matt Murdock listening to a dying Foggy's heartbeat at the very end of Daredevil 82 from 2006. Devastated at the loss of his best friend and brother, Matt then tosses Poindexter off the goddamn roof onto the pavement below, surrounding Karen Page with a fourth bonus bloody dude on the pavement for her to tell her therapist about. But unfortunately, that stupid hoe Benjamin would survive that fall, likely due to his slightly enhanced physiology after Kingpin shattered the shit out of his spine and paralyzed him. Because if you remember, at the very end of Season 3, a surgeon named Dr. Kenji Oyama was operating on Bullseye's spine, injecting him with a special compound called cognium meant to replace his vertebrae with a more resilient alloy. Cognium is of course 100% fictional and was introduced in 1993's Marvel Comics Presents number 137 as a smart metal capable of breaking down into little blocks and reassembling themselves into different shapes. Basically nanotechnology. This is a nod to how the original Bullseye from the comics, named Lester, originally had his spine, skull, and fist injected with adamantium by a scientist named Kenji Oyama, due to Marvel not owning the rights to those adamantium mines over at 20th Century Fox at the time. Colin Farrell's Bullseye also underwent surgery after surviving being thrown from the top of a building by Daredevil at the end of 2003's Daredevil movie. But it's unclear what type of surgery that version of Bullseye had because we never really got a sequel. But anyways, Matthew, completely distraught, takes off his mask, revealing his identity to retired Detective Cherry. And as Daredevil's mask falls to the pavement below to reflect the metaphorical death of Daredevil, we can see that one of the horns on the top have been broken off, symbolizing how Matt Murdock has now lost a piece of his own self to the death of his closest friend. The opening title sequence that follows then shows us various statue figures crumbling and falling apart, only for those crumbled pieces to rise from the dust to form a newly reformed Daredevil statue, a fantastic representation of the rebirth motif of the series. The crumbling statues that we see during the sequence include Daredevil's mask, the back of Kingpin's head, the blindfolded Lady Justice and her scales, what looks like the top of Grace Church in New York, Kingpin's crumbling fist, which he uses as foam fingers for his campaign, Lady Justice's crumbling scales, an NYPD badge, the Nelson, Murdock, and Page sign that we saw earlier, and the head of the Statue of Liberty. Then at the end of the sequence, we are finally shown the Daredevil Born Again title card, cleverly designed with the New York City skyline at the very bottom to make the red Daredevil text look like it's oozing both blood and red paint, pointing towards the presence of the disturbing Daredevil villain Muse in this series, a villain obsessed with a very morbid brand of art. And of course, the Born Again subtitle is a reference to the Born Again Daredevil story arc that ran from Daredevil 227 to Daredevil 231. However, there isn't much influence from that run on the story of this particular series, as Netflix's last season of Daredevil pretty much covered a lot of the major plot points of that story. So Marvel Studios pretty much only borrowed the name. But it is still a fitting name for Marvel Studios to use, considering how they gave Charlie Cox's version of Daredevil new life following the Netflix show's cancellation. And After the intro, we learn that 1 year has passed since that fateful day, as Matt Murdock prepares to attend Bullseye's sentencing. And as he does, a Spectrum News report on the New York City mayoral race plays on TV, with Spectrum News appearing in a number of Marvel Studios and Netflix projects in the past. And they're actually one of the main reasons why Wilson Fisk is running for mayor in the first place, as the very end of the Echo TV show shows us Fisk being inspired to run for mayor as a result of their news coverage on the mayoral race. And speaking of Fisk, played once again by Vincent D'Onofrio, we see him eating a healthy breakfast before picking out his suit for the day, with Kingpin's iconic white suit being left behind in favor for a more mayoral look. Then the scene switches to Wilson Fisk's wife Vanessa wearing her own white power suit, as she appears to have taken over the operations of Fisk Empire following Fisk's arrest at the end of season 3. Ayelet Zurer returns in the role as Vanessa Fisk after she was initially recast with actress Sandrine Holt prior to Kevin Feige's complete restructuring of the production. Both Karen Page's Deborah Ann Wall and Foggy Nelson's Eldon Henson were also not involved in the show at all before the reshoots, as reports indicated that Kevin Feige wanted to have his Daredevil be a variant Daredevil to Netflix's Daredevil, with both of the Daredevils sharing the same history with very minor tweaks. However, it seems like Feige would reverse that decision so his series could be a proper sequel to Netflix's Daredevil season 3. But anyways, when the scene starts, Ilya Repin's famous 1885 painting Ivan the Terrible and his son Ivan on November 16th, 1581 fills the frame, with that painting depicting Ivan the Terrible's regret after killing his own son in his own blind rage. A painting deeply reflective of Kingpin's own past abuse from his own father. But instead of the father killing the son, it is the son that would end up killing the father. Wilson then interrupts Vanessa's meeting with the 5 families, which includes the tracksuit mafia from Hawkeye. Wilson then informs Vanessa that he has the necessary amount of signatures to be a candidate for mayor, prompting the two to begin their plans for citywide domination while also entering the first steps to rebuilding their marriage. And during their conversation, the reflection on the table frames Wilson Fisk into a halo to fit with his own theme of being a demon in angel's clothing, the thematic opposite of Daredevil, who was an angel in demon's clothing. We then get a series of man-on-the-street interviews with Jania Walton's B.B. Urich, the niece of the late Ben Urich, who was slain by Kingpin in Daredevil Season 1. And before Matt heads to Bullseye's trial, he stops by his new law firm, Murdock and McDuffie, a law firm originally called Kirsten McDuffie and Matt Murdock in the comics, with Matt's name in little tiny letters. But comic McDuffie would tell a blind Matthew that his name was first as a joke. We then jump to the trial where Benny Bullseye would be sentenced to life in prison following Matt's statement, a statement that Matt would pause through when he detects Karen Page walk into the room, making the trip from San Francisco to New York to be there to see Foggy get justice. Matt and Karen then talk for a little while and express their mutual frustrations with their lack of communication following Foggy's death. Then Karen would give Matt his broken horn from his old Daredevil mask before she leaves. Later that night, Matt is cooking in the dark in his kitchen as the glow from a red light flashes outside of his window, with that glow, to me, being a symbolic reflection of how the city is practically crying out for Daredevil to return, especially since seconds later, Wilson Fisk would announce his candidacy for mayor of New York on TV. At his campaign headquarters, we can see both Sheila Rivera, Fisk's campaign manager, as well as Buck Cashman, played by Artie Fruition, who Fisk has hired for mysterious reasons. Introduced in Daredevil 250, Buck Cashman is the Daredevil villain codenamed Bullet, who was a super top-level government agent who also worked for Wilson Fisk on the side, performing hits and whatnot for the Kingpin of crime. He was as physically big as the Kingpin and possessed an odd level of super strength, speed, and durability for no reason whatsoever. But here, he appears to be much leaner, and kissing Kingpin's ass is one of his campaign workers by the name of Daniel Blake, played by Michael Gandolfini. And after supporting Cashman's claim that Kingpin doesn't need to change his messaging, Kingpin seems to look at Daniel Blake with a mixture of appreciation and suspicion, almost like he likes what he's hearing, but is still super suspicious about where this overenthusiastic canvasser even came from, because someone like Fisk needs to keep his head on a swivel after all. Meanwhile, the sneaky Kirsten McDuffie secretly sets Matt up on a date with a woman named Heather Glenn, played by Margarita Levieva. Heather Glenn is one of Matt Murdock's love interests in the comics that was introduced in the pages of 1975's Daredevil 126. The character was also introduced in the 2003 Daredevil film, but only in the form of a breakup voicemail that Matt Murdock checks after fighting crime.
Matt, it's Heather. Are you there? Of course you're not there. You're never there. At least not for me.
The two have a lovely surprise date before Matt decides to go on another date the very next day with Wilson Fisk himself at a local diner, where he warns him that he'll be there should Wilson ever fall out of line. Fisk then gives Matt his own warning that when he's elected mayor, he's going to make sure that all masked vigilantes will be prosecuted by the full extent of the law. And win the mayoral election he did, just like Kingpin did in the 2022 Devil's Reign story arc, which the series is taking a huge amount of inspiration from. And in that story, we saw Kingpin announce the Powers Act, a piece of federal legislation that would see the arrest of anyone performing superpower vigilantism, something that MCU Kingpin especially hates after his ex-daughter figure Maya Lopez would use her own superpowers to dive into Kingpin's mind and force him to relive his past trauma at the end of the Echo series. And after his victory, Kingpin reunites on a roof with his wife Vanessa, where he tells her that he knows that she's been unfaithful with a man named Adam, but Wilson promises not to kill Adam in order for Vanessa to stick around to save their marriage. And the episode ends with Fisk being thematically lit up by white lights from the city, while Matt is covered in the glow of red lights, foreshadowing another inevitable clash between the white-suited Kingpin and the red-suited Daredevil. This then leads us into episode 2, an episode that starts with Kingpin with his wedding ring hand on his head, indicating that his mind is on his marriage before he addresses the city of New York following his victory. And while Wilson's speech is being broadcast on the streets of Times Square during a New Year's celebration, you can see advertisements for the Pim Van Dyne Foundation, the company run by Hope Van Dyne in Ant-Man 3. Hope's foundation has also apparently been handing out special New Year's hats for everyone celebrating on the streets, which is nice, and also the perfect size for Hope to cover that whack-ass haircut that she was rocking in Quantumania. Cover that shit up, girl. Never wear that again. And since this is New York City, the home of the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan himself, you already know that there's going to be ads for Rogers the Musical, truly the Hamilton of the MCU, produced by Lin-Manuel Miranda. But anyway, during Kingpin's speech, he mentions how the city does not need vigilantes wearing skulls on their chest or a man who dresses in a spider outfit, directly referencing both John Bernthal's The Punisher and Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the same breath, which is kind of wild, but also sort of makes sense considering that the world still thinks that Spider-Man riddled Quentin Beck with bullets in the UK back in Spider-Man Far From Home. As Matt Murdock listens to this broadcast, his ears also scan the public reaction outside, with someone saying, "What are you gonna do? Move to Boston? You hate the Celtics," in response to Wilson's win, a statement that my black Bostonian ass found deeply offensive, and I hope that a Chitauri whale falls on your house, my good sir. How dare you? Meanwhile, while all this is going down, my man Hector Ayala heads down to the 168th Street subway station and tries to stop two guys from beating up some other guy. Ideally, he would be doing this ass beating with his white tiger outfit on while being empowered by his white tiger amulet, but he goofed up and didn't have that on him at the time, like some sort of Tobey Maguire Peter Parker in No Way Home. But he would not goof up as bad as one of the guys that he was fighting, who gets absolutely obliterated by a train after tripping over his boy like a dingus after trying to push Hector onto the tracks himself. But Hector would soon discover that these dummies were in fact cop dummies, and the White Tiger would find himself behind bars, charged with murdering a police officer and attacking Siegfried and Roy in 2003. And after the intro, we find Wilson Fisk sitting at his big fancy mayor's desk, thinking about his abusive father, Bill Fisk, and how old Billy Fisk passed down his love for former Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia to him. LaGuardia was the 99th mayor of New York from 1934 to 1946, and his legacy likely inspired Bill Fisk to run for city council himself. Wilson then complains about having to meet District Attorney Benjamin Hochberg, a character that was first introduced in the pages of 2015's Daredevil #2 and was also the DA in the Daredevil comics. He's played by John Benjamin Hickey a little bit later on in this episode when he faces off against Matt and Hector in court, after Matt gets Hector to agree to let him represent him in the following scene. A scene where Matt overhears Hector getting beat up by some corrupt cops at the 15th precinct. And after the judge declares that Hector be held without bail, Matt asks Cherry and Kirsten to visit Hector's wife to try to get her to support him at his coming trial. And while snooping around Hector's house, Cherry enters his bedroom where we can see a picture of a little girl on the wall. It's unclear who exactly this girl is, but there is a good chance that this picture could be hinting towards Hector's sister, Ava Ayala, the current White Tiger in the comics. However, since this girl does look pretty young, there is the possibility that this could also be Hector's niece, Angela Del Toro, the second White Tiger after Hector in the comics. But Cherry would quickly locate Hector's White Tiger suit and special magical White Tiger amulet, leading Matt to confront Hector about leaving out an important detail that can both jeopardize his case and make things worse for superheroes on a political level. After this, Matt walks down the street where a priest can be heard referencing John 1 verse 29, which has John the Baptist exclaiming, "Here is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And seemingly inspired by this verse, Matt decides to track down the partner of the deceased cop who arrested Hector in the first place. Matt overhears him on the phone about to track down and kill the guy that Hector saved at the subway, but he manages to get to his apartment before that crooked cop. And after learning this dude's name is Nicky Torres, Matt leads Nicky out of the window so he can act as a key witness in his case. And just in time too, because in comes Officer Asshole and his stupid ass friend ordering 2 fresh cans of whoop ass from the man without fear himself. However, before those 2 goons lose consciousness, we can see that at least one of them has a Punisher skull tattoo on their arm, a clear sign that Marvel Studios plans on addressing the real-world phenomenon of cops being inspired by the ruthlessness of Marvel's Punisher to use excessive and sometimes even lethal force to take down criminals at any cost. Meanwhile, Wilson Fisk is busy making his first big moves as mayor, making a public show about filling in a giant pothole in the street before going full Kingpin and threatening the police chief to not resign by threatening his family, because if he resigned, he would have manipulated the NYPD against Fisk. And this is all thanks to a heads up by Ben Urich's reporter niece, BB Urich, who tried to ask Wilson about his wife Vanessa, but would get quickly shut down by the mayor because they still be working shit out in therapy. With his brand new therapist, Heather Glenn, who Buck Cashman scooped out himself after attending one of Heather's book signings for her book called Live Without Fear, a title that directly references Daredevil's reputation as the man without fear. However, right before she meets Buck, she actually runs into a sketchy-looking boy played by actor Hunter Doohan, who desperately asks her to take him as her new patient. She does agree and give him her email, but that might not be the best idea because something tells me that this dude, who is only given the name Bastion in the credits, is actually the future supervillain Muse that Daredevil will be facing off against this season. Introduced in Daredevil 11 from 2016, Muse was introduced as a serial killer who used the corpses of people he killed to make his own twisted version of art. Muse in the comics is actually classified as an Inhuman who is described as a living black hole for sensory information, meaning that he can hide his presence incredibly well from a sensory-dependent Daredevil. But it is heavily unlikely that Muse will be labeled as an Inhuman in the MCU, as mutants seem to be the main focus for Marvel these days. But if this is actually Muse here in this scene, things might not look so great for Miss Heather Glenn long term, because Muse is not the type of person that can be rehabilitated. And chances are, Matt might be forced to witness the woman that he loves get butchered by a batshit Banksy. But we will have to wait and see on that. Good God, I cannot wait for the rest of the season, man. But anyways, that is it for this breakdown of episodes 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again. What do you guys think of this premiere? Let us know in the comment section down below. You guys can follow me at Mastertainment on Twitter, YouTube, or Blue Sky, wherever I am on the internet. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers Show on YouTube by hitting that subscribe button and maybe hitting that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. But like always, I've been MT, you guys have been amazing, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.